Welcome back. We are in Bodhisattva Crazy Land. We've been in Bodhisattva Crazy Land for the past couple weeks. Bodhisattva Crazy Land, the truth is stranger than fiction. And so I want to start with a little bit of fiction that is trying to point us to the truth. Dune, Jameis, I'm quoting Jameis from Dune. The mystery of life is not a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. We cannot understand the process by stopping it. We must merge with the process. We must join it. Right? The mystery of life is not a problem to solve, but a reality to experience. We cannot understand the process by stopping it. We must merge with the process. We must join it. So we're talking about processes. That's why I'm leading with this. Also, the truth is stranger than fiction. Also, we're in Bodhisattva Crazy Land. So I want to share a little bit about, I'm always exploring. I'm just trying to check out what people are talking about on the, cutting edge of our zeitgeist, our common sense, like view, what we assume to be true about things. And so, there's a lot of psychedelic research happening in like actual research facilities, universities, and so on. Apparently, there was a recent DMT, some type of DMT and laser experiment. I have to keep listening to the podcast, but basically, they were drawing the conclusion that aliens are simulating our experience as humans, right? And so we hear that without having been immersed, let's say, in a comprehensive and non-sectarian classical spiritual education. So I'm just gonna call the Dharma what the Dharma is: Buddhism, the Dharma, esoteric Christianity, esoteric yoga. All of those things we could just loosely describe them as a comprehensive and classical spiritual education, let's say. So when we hear something like, oh, the aliens are simulating our experience or something, right? It's like, that might sound crazy, but to a Buddhist master, that's like on par with the entire thing, right? Or even just an authentic Christian practitioner, right? There are superior beings observing us and evaluating our performance. And based on our performance, based on how we treat our environment and its inhabitants, we have access to more sustainable, fulfilling lives, or we find ourselves in more chaotic situations. So even though we're hearing something about, oh, this is some simulation or whatever, it's like that has been actually, from spiritual master's point of view, that's been the fact of the thing the entire time, right? Our performance is being evaluated by our guardians, by our, Pleiadian councils or God, or however you want to conceive of that, right? We're being watched. Our performance is being evaluated. We are, we're auditioning, or if that sounds too out there, we're creating our future action by action, mental action, verbal, physical action. We're creating our future moment by moment, and those futures can be more fulfilling, more rewarding, more sustainable, or the opposite. Okay. And so here we go, folks. Welcome to the Symphony of Seven. We're in subtle body land today. Precious human life, endowed with liberty and opportunity. May we make the most of it. Imminent death, in other words, right? Let's not waste this precious opportunity. The Vikings are here. Sorry, I'm pressing the wrong buttons. The Vikings are here. We should do something about it. In other words, each of us is operating the machinery of our minds and bodies, thinking, or happy Sunday, it's 12 o'clock. My coffee quota has not been met. basically we're crazy, but we think we're sane, right? Basic insanity. And that's the most dangerous situation possible because any moment might be catastrophic. Any agreement might be catastrophic because we have no idea how to evaluate ourselves or what we're experiencing. And so we should do something about that, right? Imminent death. I don't know how long I'm going to have to make progress um, with respect to resolving or reconciling myself to the mystery. So I should do something about it. All right. Sorry, folks. We are in a space that might feel like crazy land. How do we know that we are in an authentic space? Are we being encouraged to test what's being proposed, the theories as well as the practices? Um, is there a literary tradition associated with the space that we're inside of? Are the students and practitioners being encouraged to debate one another, to enhance their own understanding of the concepts? Where is the HQ located? Is it located in modernity, meaning is it using contemporary life? Is it filtering, or is it um, showing us how relevant the Dharma is to contemporary life? Is it provoking us? Is it encouraging us to think critically about how we view ourselves and other people? Is it challenging? Is it probing? Is it making us uncomfortable? Right. And then in addition to all those things, um, is it still bringing attention to the tradition itself? We've talked about the foundation, what we're going to call the foundation of the foundation. In other words, these are what professional students will actually memorize. Memorization imprints and then allows us to reflect more deeply on the ideas. So the foundation of the foundation, the Dharma compass, the three principal aspects, and then understanding the stages of the path in terms of the theory of the Four Noble Truths, or the theory of the truths of noble beings, as well as the Eightfold Path that represents the individual vehicle, and then the theory of shared identity and the aims of a bodhisattva that represent the universal vehicle. Like, how sharp are we with those in order? Right. And so continuing our aspiration to nobility and really thinking about now, if we wanted to, what we've basically outlined for the past 9 weeks can become a real sadhana, right? An actual formal seated practice. Basically, contemplation and prayer. It's a amalgamation or a synthesis. These concepts can become a formal seated practice, a formal seated contemplation and prayer practice. And so we're going to outline. We've made some modifications to the first two. So here we go to noble reasoning, remembering that we would rather experience a sustainable and fulfilling life, and that we do not want to experience a chaotic or dissipated or wasted life. Point zero, right? Point zero, keeping our eye on the ball. What do you want? I don't want to suffer. No one wants to suffer. Remembering that. What's a better way to say that? We would like to experience fulfilling, sustainable, purposeful lives, and we do not want to experience confused, wasted lives. In other words, the zone of sustainability or the zone of dissipation are effects, and so we should really focus on the causes. We've modified cause 1 to cause associated cause 1.1, thinking about how it's actually incoherent to think that we could exist without existence, right? That somehow our existence can be somewhere other than inside of existence itself. That makes no sense. So somehow we are um, connected to life, right? And the second cause for our capacity to reside in sustainability and avoid dissipation is becoming capable of helping our environment and its inhabitants thrive. We got to go. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. So, just reviewing noble reasoning. Step one now would be to generate the aspiration to have the courage to realize I have no idea who I am, why I'm here, and that's very dangerous. And I would like to get rid of that. Step two, I'd like to really see clearly, intellectually grasp clearly how deeply I depend on my environment and its inhabitants. Step three would be to cultivate the aspiration, what we call a spirit of stewardship, to become capable of bringing benefit to. Since I depend on my environment and its inhabitants, and it's so much bigger than I am, it makes sense to try to bring benefit to that because it's going to benefit me, as a feedback loop. So let me feed it so it can improve, and that will improve my experience. Step four, then beyond simply generating an aspiration to do those things, making a vow. These are going to be the steps, the vows, making a vow to commit the rest of this life to cultivating the actions of body, speech, mind, making a vow to commit the rest of this life to mastering empathy, prayer, and aspirational bodhicitta. Step 5.5, being John Malkovich, the floor 5.5 here. Were someone to become that serious, they would inevitably magnetize themselves to an authentic space and be introduced to the universal vehicle teachings, which would, again, provoke or help us think about our relationship, not just to the environment and its inhabitants, in other words, space, but our relationship to time, right? If continuity is a thing, then in other words, if an object, if when I observe a tree, for example, right, I'm observing an effect, that tree had a cause that was obviously not located in the present moment. So in other words, time and objects, there's a relationship between time and space, continuity in time and space, and that has a implication on my own continuity, right? I came from somewhere yesterday, 2 days ago, last week, 10 years ago, etc., and will continue. So these vows, step 4 and 5 vows, it makes sense for me to also make them for all future lives. When I'm ready to do that, I take a vow. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector of those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those in the dark, and a servant to all those in need. For as long as space endures, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. Step 7, having taken the Bodhisattva vow, we vow to cultivate ourselves in order to become capable of inspiring and educating others. We realize that in order to do that, we have to become masters of theory and practice. And in order to do that, we need teachers. So this is a sadhana, meaning a formal practice that we can engage in, that I would encourage you to try out and test and see how it feels to do this with sincerity. And you'll probably feel and focused and more committed, right? In other words, you will start to actually feel more like reality, right? I'll break that down later. I would encourage you to try this as a formal seated practice. Again, we are in the noble heroic vehicle, the universal vehicle. In other words, the more that we recognize our relationship to our environment and its inhabitants, the more we become motivated to protect and support its well-being. right? And so this basically breaks it down in super simple terms. If anything I can experience is an integral part of me, like my hand, the air, etc. When any integral part of me is suffering, then I'm reflexively motivated to relieve its suffering. Notice that when you feel connected to something, like your hand, when something threatens the well-being of your hand, you're instinctively motivated to relieve its suffering. So this is the essence of the noble heroic vehicle. This is the essence of the universal vehicle. This is the essence of the Mahayana. This is the essence of the Bodhisattva vehicle. If we are related, if we are integrally related, essentially related, if we share an identity with our environment and its inhabitants, then it makes sense that we should be motivated to be invested in it as much as we are our own kneecaps or whatever. Or when I stub my toe, I'm invested in my toe's health. So I do something about it, right? So here we go with the heroic intellectual realizations. Again, invitation to familiarize ourselves with these concepts, because this will be stuff that we reflect on a lot now moving forward. Notice that we cannot locate a sense of our body without the body, the concept of body, or our body being attached to limbs, organs, air, and so on. In other words, our body is composed of parts. There is a concept we're carrying around called my body. And the only reason that I'm holding on to that concept is because there's other things that it's attached to that I consider to be parts of it, that compose it, right? We're in Bodhisattva crazy land. These are essential concepts now moving forward. Notice that you cannot locate your body apart from those things that it's attached to. Okay, yeah, obviously that makes sense. But when we take it up to go up an octave here, notice that you also cannot locate your sense of self without that self being attached to the experience or embedded within an experience. Also, notice that your body is like embedded within. It's like the center point of all these other things. Your body, your limbs, your organs, right? In other words, all these things are, like all roads lead to Rome. All the limbs, organs, air, and so on leads to the body. Notice that you cannot locate your sense of self apart from what you're experiencing. And then obviously the mic drop, or the rain on the parade. Well, we're not acting like our environment and its inhabitants are as essential to our sense of self as our hands are. If it is true that our sense of self depends upon, originates in, arises from our environment, then why do we not act with the same type of urgency to support the health of the thing that is an essential part of ourselves? This is the entire basis of the Mahayana Bodhisattva stages. That, in other words, that we can intellectually grasp the relationship that we have to our environment and its inhabitants, but we don't feel motivated, or we're not sure, even if we were motivated, we're not sure what we should do about that. So our sense of self, again, intellectual, hopefully setting us up to act with more intensity. Our sense of self and everything that we experience, our sense of self and the environment and its inhabitants are a shared identity. This is what is meant. And then when there's shared identity, as we've touched here and there, the health of one component influences the health of the other, for better or worse. We know this to be true if we have rowdy neighbors, or if we've been the rowdy neighbors, right? If our stomach, if all the little, the microbiome of our stomach is partying too hard, like, we feel the effects of that, right? Conversely, we could eat some yogurt and bring some calming effect to the microbiome, right? When things are connected, they're going to influence each other for better or worse. Obviously, right? Okay. And now we're really trying to dial this in here. A sense of self is a body. Our sense of self is a body. A body is a container. A body and a sense of self are synonyms. In other words, our body and a body conceptually and our sense of self conceptually are synonyms, meaning there there are there's information inside of it, meaning there are pieces of life that are inside of it or not inside of it. Sense of self, my sense of self can be thought of as a container. And there are things inside of it. There's a limited amount of things inside of it. Or if we were Buddhas, there would be everything possible would be inside of it. Sense of self is a container. A body is a container. There are things inside of it, or there's a limited amount of things inside of it, or there's an unlimited amount of things inside of it. And so if we can intellectually grasp our relationship to our environment, when we examine in the environment, notice that there's no end to the environment. And so bodhisattvas, heroes, crazies, crazy hat land, crazy land dwelling bodhisattvas are willing to try to do something about the fact that there are inhabitants in the environment who are not having the best time. And so how can I inspire them to live more sustainably? How can I become a master of theory and practice so that when I have succeeded in inspiring someone, that then I can help support their education. Right, and so this is kind of reviewing that. The heroic vehicle, in other words, how we help ourselves, how we're helping parts of ourselves. We do that by drinking coffee when we need to refresh the brain chemicals during lectures. So this is like a hyper distilled way to look at the heroic vehicle. Number one is to be mentally vigilant and constantly remember the indestructible motive. My environment is as much a part of me as my hand is. Therefore, it only makes sense for me to be totally invested in its well-being, to protect its well-being and health. How can I do that? To become an inspiration. How do we become an inspiration? By mastering the foundational vehicle, the Hinayana, the Eightfold Path. When we succeed in mastering the Eightfold Path, we will become inspiring to other people because we become excellent, basically. Our life is well put together. And then the third step then is to master the Mahayana, which will allow us to become capable of explaining, teaching the Dharma. And so we're in territory of bullet point 3 here today. And so practicing heroic education, just as a reminder, to test everything. Don't just believe what's said. Even though maybe, let's say at this point, I really have faith that my mentor knows how to get to New York. I'm not allowed to have complete faith. I need to test whatever the next direction is. Follow the recipe as outlined in Noble Reasoning, and then remembering that we're optimally positioned. What does that mean? What does it mean to be optimally positioned? It means that we're made in the image of God in Western terms. And then in that phrase, basically what that means is let's review our mind-body complexes. So God, in other words, is the truth, everything, the super subtle mind-body complex, the image, that which is the first iteration of the truth, or a way to relate to the truth before we have the tolerance to do it in totality, is the subtle mind-body complex. And then that which is produced from the factory of the subtle mind-body complex is the gross mind-body complex. Again, reviewing so that we can build a legit practice that has a basis to it, so we can stand on something. So as we've mastered empathy and prayer and aspirational bodhicitta, we find ourselves in authentic Dharma spaces, and we're presented with the mind-body complexes and the universal vehicle as the objects of familiarization. And this is what is meant by know thyself, right? Know meaning experience directly the relationship that we have to our environment beyond the intellectual grasp. And so then again, just continuing to familiarize. What is the super subtle mind-body complex? It's all planes of existence, the nature of the super subtle mind-body complex, infinity and time, space, and knowledge, all times, all objects, and satisfaction. Were someone to experience that dimension of their biology, it would feel like connecting to all times, objects, and satiations at once. It would give us the revelation that we're going to live, and that we are connected to everything. And so therefore, we're not threatened by it in the same way that we're connected to our elbows, and we're not threatened by our own elbows. And we would also know the aims and aspirations of objects. And then, when the Buddha said, uncomplicated, uncreated, profound peace, or Christ, the peace that surpasseth all understanding. The implications of that, again, would be that I've never been anywhere else other than at home and at peace and at home with my family. So think about when you've been at home or you've been at peace with your family, but that doesn't mean that your family members are necessarily at peace with themselves or with each other, right? So the peace is something that is satisfying for ourselves, but not necessarily for the family members who might not be at peace with themselves or with each other. Obviously, we're not acting like this is the case because we haven't experienced it, right? So this is the entire point, Jameis. This is the entire point. The mystery of life is not a problem to solve. I can't solve it intellectually. I have to experience this, right? Bringing out more Emerson, just as the cosine of the experience of the super subtle. The soul, raised over passion, beholds identity and eternal causation, perceives the self-existence of truth and right, and calms itself with knowing that all things go well. And a cosine from Atisha, I, the yogi, have practiced just this. So really trying to drill down the main problem that bodhisattvas acknowledge, the courage to acknowledge. Really trying to drill down on this today specifically. With these heroic realization slides, really trying to drill down to the problem, right? I think we had a slide on here, or maybe it's on a website, I don't remember where it is, but the quality of the problem is a forerunner for the profundity of the solution. The quality of the problem that is identified is a forerunner to the profundity of the solution that is attained. The quality of the problem that is identified is a forerunner of the profundity of the solution that is attained. So, and this is the problem. We're disconnected from the truth of our own identity. And that's why we suffer. We're disconnected from the truth of our own identity. And that's why we suffer. In other words, we need to remove the barrier. There's something in the way. Distance and obscuration from a traditional point of view. There's something in the way between our current view of ourselves and others and the environment and what is the truth about that, who we are, who they are, what this is. In other words, we need to create a bridge to make communion with the truth possible, right? Christ as a concept is the bridge that allows communion to be possible. The Buddha as a concept is a bridge. Becoming a Buddha as a concept is a bridge that allows communion with the truth to become possible. In other words, there's something that we need to create. That's one way to view it, or there's something that we need to remove. There's a process of removal that's required. And so then again, we've illustrated this. I really hope that, again, I'm taking some liberties, but from a Dharma point of view, this is the most traditional way to make the point, is that we're trying to incorporate as many non-sectarian or relevant metaphors as possible, right? And so I hope that's helpful for us to illustrate, bring in other traditions, showing the rainbow bridge from Norse mythology, that there is something that is bridging the gap between the divine space and the mundane space. Again, in the Roerich painting, there is a literal machine, right, bridging the divine and the mundane. And so the entire, really cannot stress this enough, the entire Mahayana universal vehicle, heroic vehicle, bodhisattva vehicle is about the creation of the bridge between our ordinary view of things and the extraordinary view of things. The entire Mahayana, the entire bodhisattva, the entire heroic vehicle, the examination, analysis, familiarization with the subtle mind-body complex is the exercise of creating the machine that will bridge the gap between our ordinary view and ordinary conception of things and reveal to us the fact of the extraordinary state and nature of things. What is the goal of life? To create yourself a soul, to create a bridge, to become Christ-like, to awaken. This is the goal of life, to create a soul, to create a bridge, to become Christ-like, to awaken, to solve the mystery of life it's not a problem to solve, to experience the reality of it, to merge with the process, to flow with it. Study and mastery of the subtle complex universal vehicle removes the distance between ourselves and God and prepares us for becoming capable of directly experiencing our super subtle complex as directly as we experience the gross complex. I'll just quote Emerson again, the search for the greats becomes the most serious occupation of maturity, right? The more that we get fed up with inhabiting the state of ordinary conception of things, the more serious we become about total investigation a total investigation of the subtle complex. In other words, attempting to be really totally attempting to become more heroic, period, full stop. So just reviewing again, what is the subtle complex, the three components of the subtle complex. There is a sense of self there. There's a subtle mind there, which contains all archetypes, all records, all hopes and fears, all virtues and vices, and a subtle body there, what we're calling the programs, neural networks, satiation cycles, primal energies, and ancestral artifacts. And so let's now use some contemporary language to help us familiarize ourselves with the subtle complex. And now really getting into the meat of, today's lecture, concept that we call the Symphony of Seven. I also want to familiarize myself with some coffee. concept that we're calling the Symphony of Seven. Anyone who's looked at Western philosophy has probably encountered Nietzsche, and one of Nietzsche's claims is that there, is that within us, there are multiple wills that are in conflict with one another. They're vying for supremacy, right? And so it's amazing to see modern academics and intellectuals really start to wrestle with this concept. And I'm like screaming at the TV like a football game, like Symphony of Seven, It's like they're playing football with each other. I'm screaming at the game, nah, Symphony of Seven. Anyway, so I'm excited. I'm excited and hopeful that modern academics, modern psychologists will, run into this soon. So multiple wills, and obviously, then again, if we are using familiarization, yeah, this is good. I really want to try to invite you to try to be hyper familiar every single moment, right? Try to be hyper familiar. Try to pay attention. As my mentor used to say, take your time and pay attention. Because notice that you already have experience of this. You can notice that there's different wills inside of you telling you to do this or that already, right? Again, I'm testing this for myself, and I'm starting to gain trust in the mentor because the mentor is saying something that I'm already experienced, or I already have experience of, right? So there are multiple wills that reside inside of us, right? What the hell are those things? What I'm saying is that's a way for us to understand the subtle mind-body complex. Notice that there's different wills that reside inside of us, pushing us around all over the place. Is that just my biology? That's my monkey, whatever. Okay, so here we go. So let's break this concept down. So the Symphony of Seven is going to use camping as the metaphor. Life can be likened to a campground where people pitch tents, have interactions, and so on. Activity on the campground is motivated by 5 satiation cycles and refined by 2 discoveries, quicksilver and gold. Now, each individual is going to experience the same set of satiation cycles. Some will be more dominant than others. Traditionally, these cycles are known as chakras. So this is why there is a relationship between the Symphony of Seven and the subtle body, but there's also some psychology associated with it. This is why I also want to encourage us to think about, they're called mind-body complexes because it's not as easy as it seems to dissect or divide the mind from the body. Right? In the Matrix, if you die in the Matrix, the body cannot live without the mind. There is a direct relationship between the mind and the body. It's hard to separate them. So there's overlapping influence and overlapping connectivity. And so even though we're talking about something that can be thought of specifically as a function of the subtle body, there is psychological activity there, for lack of a better word. Okay, so each individual experiences the same set of satiation cycles, some of them more dominant. Traditionally, these cycles are known as chakras, or literally means wheel. And that's an appropriate metaphor for the cycles because they're expressed in predictable, measurable patterns of time. Now, I'm going to encourage anyone who's a crazy person that wants to sit and familiarize with the drives. You could literally time them. You can literally start to time them and notice that a drive is going to speak up. It's like on time. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. Chakras, like relationships, cannot be located as static physical phenomena. This is why it's called a subtle body. We're not going to have an autopsy. No one's going to have an autopsy. And like, there's that chakra, right? It's in a more subtle plane of existence. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? Like, Where is, like, for example, I'm related to my wife. I'm married to my wife. Where is the marriage? Where is the marriage? Where is my relationship to my wife? Where is my relationship to my mustache? Where is my relationship to my boss at work? Right? I just want to make the point that even though we cannot locate certain things, that doesn't diminish the validity, the existential validity of it. It is a factual thing that I'm related to my wife, that I'm married, right? In other words, mental or conceptual objects are here in this plane of existence and in the subtle plane and in the super subtle. Conceptual, mental, etc., however you want to conceive of that, invisible concepts have existential validity. So even though I can't locate the relationship that I have to something, or I can't locate a chakra in the gross plane, it doesn't mean that it's not there. Anyway, the degree of health that we experience in any dimension of life, from physical to psychological to spiritual, depends on the cultivation of a constructive relationship with these cycle centers. Okay. Now, before I keep going, I think we're kind of good on time. We're kind of good on time. So I just want to pause and say that. Now, when we're talking about relating to the centers, I want to just give an example, right? Having a healthy relationship to something versus not having a healthy relationship to something. And then again, whether or not having a healthy relationship to something or with something can be construed or qualified as sane or insane. Clear or distorted. And I'm pausing to say that, notice that this takes us all the way back to the Dharma compass. Is my view of the thing clear or distorted? And that, as a concept, as a fact of how we're interpreting it, applies all the time. Is my view of this thing clear or distorted? Is my relationship based on the view, based on how I view something, I'm going to relate to the thing. Based on how I view the thing and am motivated to relate to the thing, I act with the thing. It's either healthy or it's not. It's clear or it's distorted. It's sane or it's insane. Now imagine that every time you saw me, I was drinking bleach. Be like, bro, you're insane. You're doing a thing that makes no sense. Okay, and I'm trying to set up something just completely ridiculous so that we can hopefully start to discover where we are either misinterpreting, assigning too much value, being stuck, being fixated, grasping, being greedy, lusting after, being slaves to, etc. So all of that language that you've heard spiritual teachers say has to do with the way that we're relating to the cycles. Or another way to think of it is every single archetype, which we're probably going to talk about next week, if I can actually get through this, because now I'm talking too much. Every single archetype, quote unquote, is basically, you could think of it as a configuration of like how much bandwidth or energy, essential energy, is inside of, each of the centers. Anyway, I'm going to keep going, and then if there's questions, stop me. So how do we understand the cycle centers and as patterns of time? And there's 5 of them, right? So the first one is called survival. Each of the, and they're called satiation cycles because they are satisfied momentarily, and then the cycle starts again. Then they're satisfied momentarily, and then the cycle starts again. And then they're satisfied momentarily, and then the cycle starts again. As soon as the cycle is satisfied, it starts again. So this is also why there's the concept of trying to transcend the cycles, because what we can realize about hunger, for example, is that it can be very satisfying, but it does not give me any sense of transcendent revelation. Okay, so let me just say there's a satiation period associated with each cycle. There's a revelation. There's a psychological motivating factor, in other words, inside of each cycle. There's a math equation associated with each cycle. There's a duality concept associated with each cycle. And there's an enlightened understanding, what's called a wisdom dakini in traditional terms. In other words, if I were to become a Buddha, then this is something that I would experience about the formation of the universe or something like that. So I'm just going to go through now just because we're starting to run short on time. So the first cycle is called survival. We can notice this. You get hungry, you need to eat, you feel good, and then you don't feel good again. And then you feel good, and then you don't feel good again, right? And it's immediate to one day. I need to breathe air right now. Notice that you need to breathe air right now. How can you notice that? Hold your breath and just notice that there's a cycle drive machine, deity or demon, depending on how I'm relating to it, inside of you that's making you do things. The cycles are making us do things is another way to think of it. It's making us do things. We can either be slaves to them or we can be indentured stewards, servants of them. Are they bad? It depends on which vehicle you're studying. A Buddha does not view them as that. Okay, anyway, not something to be discarded or renounced, but managed with health, managed with health, appreciated, valued, tamed, etc. That's where you hear all of these things are associated with this concept we're talking about. Anyway, cycle number 1, survival. The satiation period is immediate to one day. When we are in survival mode, this is mine. This is mine. I will fight you for it. I will kill you for it. This is mine. The math, therefore, is I'm more important than you. The duality concept, the Janus concept, is order versus chaos. And the enlightened understanding, the wisdom dakini, is that objects are real. The specification and diversification of objects is necessary in order for God to express itself. This is the enlightened understanding. I'm going to keep going. The second cycle. And then notice the difference between the cycles is the duration of time, the size of the time increases. Play, we could call this sex. Notice that there's something in you that makes you want to do that. Is it just your biology? Where is it located? It must be that brain chemical, right? From a Buddhist, from a Dharma master point of view, this is solved when we examine the subtle. So satiation period, 1 day to 1 week. Now, what I'm talking about distortion is, notice it's distorted. It's distorted when it's attempting to satiate itself more than is the natural satiation period. Whatever. Anyway, I'm gonna speed up because we got 10 minutes. The satiation period is 1 day to 1 week. The psychological motivating impetus is let's party, right? At my tent. It's still, I'm more important than you. I'm trying to get you in my tent so we can get jiggy. The duality concept is attraction versus repulsion. The enlightened understanding, the wisdom dakini, is that specified, diversified objects are connected to each other and therefore they influence each other. I'm going to keep going just for time's sake because we could go hours and hours and days on this concept. The third is we called success, satiation period 1 year to 10 years. Notice that you'll do something like go to college or get a job, and you'll be very satisfied in that moment. But then in 6 months, you're like, I need more. Or in 2 years, like, I need more. Or no, like I always joke, nobody wants to stay in high school. No one wants to stay in 12th grade for your entire life, right? And so the drive to do more, to experience professional growth, however you want to conceive of that. 1 year to 10 years, I can manifest the best 10th. Self includes other. So, excuse me, self is greater than other. The duality concept here is concentration versus dilution. The enlightened understanding is that specified diversified objects have qualities but are malleable. The fourth cycle is companionship. Again, the time scale is going up, 10 years to a lifetime. In other words, when it's satisfied, it lasts that long. The psychological motivating impetus is that you make 10th life worth living. And here we're having a change in the math that others are more valuable than ourselves. The duality, the Janus concept, is part versus whole. The enlightened understanding is that specified diversified objects will form groups of related activity. We call this like attracts like. And again, the point is that each of us is experiencing, like if you were to take a snapshot of the solar system and you've got things moving at different speeds around the sun, right? And they're like all going to be in different places, creating various types of, energy or gravity, motion, right? Based on the speed, where they're going, right? Each of us is experiencing these drives and their, gravitational force on one another, moment by moment by moment. So when we experience companionship, in other words, for the first time, I value someone else more than myself. When I experience that, I've hit a checkpoint. This checkpoint is the beginning of the discovery of purpose or meaning as dedicated effort to enhance shared existence. Notice that, again, in your own experience, notice that no matter how much success you've earned, notice no matter how much success you've experienced, no matter how many notches you got on the bedpost of baddies, no matter how many notches of baddies on the bedpost, no matter how many great meals you've eaten, no matter how many breaths of air or glasses of water or meals or notches on the bedpost or how much money you've made, when you fell in love, that felt the most meaningful. Okay, so beginning of discovery of purpose. You give my life purpose now. Now I have something to serve. Now I have a reason to live. Something like that, right? This is the experience of that. Right. So it also is the beginning of what are called the self-aggrandizement tests, which emerge from the awareness that I can do something to you or for you to improve your experience, but you should give but how, right? And so when we recognize that we can do something to improve others' experiences, we also can feel like you should give me something for this or whatever, right? And so it can devolve to I need you to do something for me now, whatever. Notice that you've done that probably. Got to keep going here, folks. So, and I also want to make the point that also just notice that it's more and more rare to meet an individual who is, let's say, stationed at one of these cycles more consistently, motivated, driven by, this is my tent. I gotta pay rent. Yo, let's hit the club. Yo, let's yo, I need to start this business. I'm trying to blow up. Let's go make all this money, right? Versus you making my life worth living, right? Notice that there are fewer people who wake up with an inner voice that some other person is more important, and therefore I'm going to take a knee. I'm going to try to steward. I'm going to, modify, constructively modify. I'm going to change whatever I need to change in order to better serve you. Notice there are fewer people that have that inner voice, that inner dialogue, that inner narrative most of the time. Then let's get more, etc. Okay, and so, genius. This one is potentially catastrophic. It's erratic. I can improve tent culture overall. This is what the thing is. I can improve things. There are fewer people who are genius, Tesla, etc. They're motivated to make the entire culture, the entire tent culture better, right? The concept here is progress versus tradition. The enlightened understanding is that everything is actually moving toward maximum expression. In other words, even though it might sound crazy, we're all on our way to become enlightened anyway, right? And so there's all these things. Anyway, notice that we could unpack these for hours and hours and days and days. Let me just try to get through the presentation. So the self-aggrandizement test that is associated with the genius cycle is that, look how amazing I am. I'm special and I'm different because I'm special. And then when it says those things to itself, it devolves to self is greater than other. So these are basically the 5 chakras. Basically, the 5 chakras as opposed to 7. 5 chakras and 2 discoveries that help us relate clearly to the chakras. The first is called, we're just going to call it Quicksilver on some Western terms. We're calling it Quicksilver. In other words, mirror. This is born. This arises from compassion, which is born from wisdom. I'm going to speed up because I need to make a point with one of these slides. I am the campground. Self is other. The dualistic concept is me and you. And the learner's union, the revelation is that I know where I'm located. I know where I'm located. Me, you, I am the campground. It's born from compassion, which is born from wisdom. The test, the self-aggrandizement test associated with Quicksilver is that I don't need to do anything except sit here because I am everything, or I'm just going to sit here and give teachings. Right? I'm special. I have a special realization. I'm just going to sit here and give teachings. And then when that narrative, when that intelligence speaks, it devolves to self is greater than other. And then the second discovery, the genesis of the second discovery is Quicksilver. The revelation is that the entire campground is made of magic. There is no math, and there is no duality, and there is no more learning from a traditional point of view. I know what and who everything is. And not only do I know what, not only do I know where I'm located, but now I know what it is, what I am, and what everything else is. And so this is what would be traditionally called becoming a Buddha, becoming spiritually initiated in the highest sense of the word. And then a checkpoint, presence stays relevant, learns everything, and subsequently offers whatever educates whomsoever about the magic of the campground. Presence uses methods ranging from mind-blowing to minuscule. Presence often moonlights as companionship, genius, or mirror. When moonlighting, presence is also subjected to the corresponding self-aggrandizement tests. Now, what's the point of all of that? This is the point, finally getting to the point of today's lecture with 40 seconds to spare. The point, the ethical implications of the Symphony of Seven. Number 1 is commonality, that each of us is experiencing the same set of challenges. That even though there are multiple voices and multiple wills inside of me, it's the same voices inside of everyone. Each of us is experiencing the same set of challenges and distortions associated with the same cycles. And each of us is longing for the same discoveries. We don't want to be slaves to the things. We want to figure out what they are, how to use them properly. So this is why, again, from a commonality point of view, this is why this is incorporated in a Bodhisattva curriculum. Okay, great. Once I figure out how to relate more sustainably to my own drives, I can offer that to other people. Hey, this is what I'm doing when I experience this, or this is how I'm starting to pacify some obsession with one of these centers. We can empathize, in other words, with each other. We can pray that they find more peace with the centers. We can aspire, again, aspirational, which I can aspire to be able to become inspirational or educate about those parts of ourselves. And the spirit and the radical selfishness, and then again, as is pointed out, that we can experience. I mean, these can sound information heavy, but if we will take our time and pay attention, you'll notice that they're doing that, and you'll also notice the most important part of this that is experienceable to us prior to Quicksilver and presence, that when we love other people, it makes our life, we have purpose. There's a direct relationship between loving others, placing others, cherishing others more than ourselves, and sense of purpose. There's a direct relationship between cherishing others more than ourselves and sense of purpose. So in other words, then becoming totally invested in others' well-being is the only way to ensure my own well-being. In other words, there's a relationship between cherishing others, truly cherishing others, and feeling sense of purpose. Okay. And so then that's the whole point of familiarizing ourselves with the Symphony of Seven, is we can start to see we have more tools with which to connect with other people. We have more direct, real-time, experiential tools. Hey, here's some things I'm experiencing some problems when I engage with this, the energy of play, or when I engage with the energy of success, or when I engage with the energy of survival, when I engage with the energy of companionship, or even genius from time to time, it like really throws me off balance or something, right? And so here's some things that I'm doing, like whatever. The entire point is that it's helping us see the matrix. It's helping us read the game, the board. It's helping us read the board. It's helping us see other people. Oh, here's this, that challenge is related to this center. Here are some exercises associated with the center, whatever. Next week, archetypal fluidity, hopefully. And just reviewing, how do we know that we're practicing right? If we wanted to sit down and do the sadhana of noble reasoning, we want to sit and start familiarizing ourselves, which is how do we know that we're doing that right? How do we know that we're doing it properly? We will feel the effects of a proper practice in the form of becoming more invested in others' well-being, right? That is the natural response to successful practice. We start to become more invested in others' well-being. We start to cherish others more. We become more committed to assisting others and maximizing their evolutionary potential. And then remembering that if we're going to have any shot at doing that, we have to become inspiring and then capable of educating, right? Capable of motivating others to practice noble reasoning. Let's close with dedication here. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector of those without protection, a protector of those without protection, a protector of those without protection, a protector of those without protection. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector of those without protection, a protector of those without protection, a protector of those without protection. For as long as space endures, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. And then just remembering, if there's still any crazy bodhisattva still on, even though we're almost 5 minutes over, that there's two different types of collections or actions or behaviors to become familiar with to the point of intimacy. That is, that we become that. We're earning wisdom. We're giving away our actions as compassion. We're earning wisdom and we're giving that wisdom away. That's compassion. We're earning wisdom, becoming more familiar with noble reasoning, with Symphony of Seven, more familiar. We're earning wisdom and then we're giving that wisdom away. That's compassion. We're earning wisdom. We're giving the wisdom away. That's compassion. Wisdom sees the unity, sees the commonality, sees the matrix, sees the principle. Compassion sees that matrix in specific locations. Wisdom recognizes the pattern. Compassion recognizing the specified location. Wisdom is about unifying. Compassion is about protecting. Wisdom, art, music. Wisdom, motive. Compassion, action. Wisdom, mind. Compassion, body. Wisdom, skill. Compassion, grit. And closing, Chef, will you start just a 30-second timer? Thanks for, sorry for going over. I, the Yogi Baker, can produce cakes at will. You who would also like to experience the deliciousness of cakeness, please follow the recipe. Happy Sunday. We have a timer just in case there's anything anyone would like me to go over one more time briefly. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Happy Sunday, folks. See you next time. Precious human life, precious human life, precious human life, precious human life.